It's always great to be back in New York City. I actually lived here for a number of years. I met and courted my wife here. Here's a bit of trivia for you. We got married and it didn't take long. She grew up in the Midwest. So the global CTO for Deloitte Consulting actually lives in Kansas City. How about that? I like to say Silicon Prairie. It has a little bit more of a chops behind it. It's great to be here on a topic that's near and dear to my heart for sure. I think there should be slides magically appearing. Even if they don't, we'll just go for it. The place I want to start is just recognizing, and it's been a great event yesterday, taking a step back just to think about the amazing time we're living in and the amount of changes happening at once. And if there's a theme that you'll see in my remarks, it's a bit of context. And as bullish as we are about cognitive automation and what IPsoft is doing and the broader machine intelligence wave, it's one of a number of things happening simultaneously, which we'd look back at this era and say, this has been the era of X fill in the blank, and then you could actually play different verbs and nouns. You could say digital, you could say cloud, you could say the broader analytics movement. Certainly machine intelligence would play within that. And some other things looming, we'll talk briefly about blockchain and the like. The fact that they're happening simultaneously, and they're absolutely related, they're not independent and isolated, it's a controlled collision between these forces, puts us in this amazing time. And I like to say with my clients that we're in this continuum of, on one side, the hero's journey of this unprecedented opportunity for innovation and growth, which is tremendous. And on the other side, we have the sort of Damocles hanging over us, this existential threat of disruption looming in every industry, in every company, in every geography, including my own. And so what do we do to basically harness everything around this and be a part of the hero's journey in the story? We did a bit of research with the MIT Sloan Management Review. And it was geared towards CEOs, was line of business presidents and senior execs. And we just basically asked, what's the likelihood of digital, and that's being used as a broad placeholder, disrupting your industry? 87% of the respondents said, with high confidence, we think digital disrupting our industry. Now, that's a bit of room of interpretation of digital and disruption, but it's a massive number, 87%. Follow-up question, how many of you feel that you're adequately prepared? 44%, and I think they were actually a little bit bullish in that read of if they're adequately prepared. Because partly is we're having a lot of trouble just defining that word digital. And anytime I walk into a boardroom where the subject is a workshop on digital transformation or digital strategy, I realize this is going to be a long 4 or 5 hours if there hasn't been a strong starting point of just how do we define, how do we make sense of that. I was the global leader of Deloitte Digital. We launched our digital consulting agency 5.5 years ago. When we launched it, the analysts and the press lashed out and said, how in the world are you keeping the Deloitte heritage as a part of your digital business as you launch it? Because they were completely anchored on the customer engagement piece of it, omni-channel and next generation, social and mobile and web outreach. And we said, listen, to us, digital, that's a piece of it for sure. Customer engagement, very important, needs to be. But it also needs to focus on, within the enterprise, digital core. How do we think about how work gets done differently in the back and mid office? And by the way, you can't do much on the customer engagement side if you don't have that hook back into customer info, order info, manufacturing info, availability, pricing, and the like. That came up in the panel. I thought that was brilliant. And then the top of the level was, how do we actually rethink products and services and offerings? How do we fundamentally think about our industry differently and the boundaries in our industry, new ecosystems that are evolving, and new business models that we need to form? And all of that to us is a collection of what digital could mean. The challenge is for any given company, what's the mission? How do we define what we're going after when we say what digital could be for us? So that's a bit of how do we make sense? We did another study 3 months ago. I led a webinar with 1,200 IT executives, and we asked just about machine intelligence. What do you see the biggest possibility for machine intelligence? It was fascinating. Customer service, which is fantastic, but an emphasis with Amelia for sure. Conversational interaction, customer service was a big piece of it. But a higher percentage response said finance. Does that surprise you, that finance was higher than customer for machine intelligence? Or are you just tired and want lunch? Anyone surprised by that? Product R&D was the next one up. IT operations, close behind. HR and shared services, close behind it. And they were all pretty well evenly matched. 23% saying finance, 20% saying customer service, 19% saying shared services. So it's tremendous, the opportunity, and I think that's also part of the challenge. How do we make this actionable? I love this view. So part of my job as CTO, I lead our research innovation. I also drive the future of our technology services and investments that we make. So this is an eye chart. If you want it, you can ping me. I'll send you the placemat view or the full report view. But I lead our tech trends research every year. And what we try to do is say, let's look at Horizon 1.5, which I like to say is the pragmatic side of prognostication, of what's coming in the next fiscal year or the one following. And when we say trends, we're very careful about saying they have to have real examples we can point to in industry and government, how they're being applied for business value. And we try to immediately shift the frame from the what of the actual technology into the so what of what it means for your business. And then if we really do our job right, it's the now what of how the heck do you get started and take action behind it. Now, I brought this up for two reasons. One, that if you could read it, in the center, and there's groupings by digital and analytics and the business of IT and cloud and core, which I'll touch on in a minute, and cyber. The top middle is around analytics in general. And 4 years ago, we had cognitive analytics as an emphasis point. And I still get asked, just last week with one of the biggest companies in the world, the conversation was, is cognitive real? And my answer is emphatically yes. And we've been tracking it for a long time. We featured it in research 4 years ago. Obviously, capabilities have advanced, and the stories we have of real business value are tremendous and beyond what I thought we'd get to in this short order, but it's absolutely real. The other piece I really like about this view, if you see cyber on the top left, or the top right on your side, we started out thinking of cyber, which was security and privacy and regulatory and compliance. And we had it as a separate topic for years. And so there was a separate chapter in Tech Trends every year for the first 4 years or so about a cyber trend, what we saw happening in cyber. And about 4 years ago, we had an epiphany and said, listen, we can't talk about any of these other topics unless we embed cyber implications inside of the treatment and think about what it means, and also not just curse the darkness, but how do we light a candle of how these new technologies might help our cyber and risk agenda. So that's been something we've been doing, and clearly that discussion is critical for cognitive automation, and that discussion of risk has evolved from just security and privacy and regulatory and compliance into a much more interesting dialogue now, into the ethics and morality and the responsibility of what these technologies mean. And this theme of just because we can, should we, and as we do, how do we think about the implications and have that as an outright part of not just our implementation path, but maybe even our company's mission and value statement, and what we actually message out to the market. So I love this view. The other piece of this is, again, that the control collision of these forces is important. And for sure, we should celebrate cognitive automation and the advances that IPsoft has made as an essential piece of this. It may be one of the most essential pieces of building blocks around everything that's happening. But we also have to shift. I don't see many successful automation initiatives. I see a lot of successful, how do we think about the future of finance? Or how do we think about the future of IT operations? How do we think about the future of customer service and the like? And to bring that to life a little bit. So I just called out 4 in particular sub-pieces of kind of how these different things have to play. A lot of the early automation investment of our clients using less cognitive solutions had a pretty low ceiling and were somewhat brittle. And so you could see the passion of Chetan this morning as he talked about the difference between what Amelia is and what chatbots are. And it came out very clearly. I take that as a leader that believes in what he's doing and the vision that he has. But you saw implementations that were about the lowest end of automation, which for us, the lowest end of automation is repetitive task execution. How do we automate and replace low-value commodity type work is interesting and potentially valuable, but it's only a small part of the equation. And we found as folks that went bullishly in that space found that if they were using it as a glorified scripting or workflow agent, and we were using the same things I built 25 years ago to do mainframe interactions with screen scraping, that suddenly it wasn't very robust. Subtle changes to experience and engagement, and user interface, or business rules would bring it down and bring it to its knees, and it couldn't evolve in coverage and complexity of the task it was looking for. So part of this core modernization, you might think that's interesting to be on a list of digital trends driving transformational change, but what we found is that legacy core systems have to be a part of this discussion. How do we have a more native service level interaction into them to allow your core information and your core transactions, how you conduct business, to be exposed in a way to allow a cognitive automation layer to take advantage of all of the assets that you have. And that's a hard thing sometimes to prioritize because for sure it's a sexier journey to say next generation customer experience, but to do that we have to do some harder work. Good news is there's a lot easier ways to do that than we've ever had before. So how do we automate the response of remediating and modernizing our core legacy systems, ERP systems, whatever it might be? But that's a huge part of this discussion. Mixed reality. I love this point in time as we shift from thinking we're so clever because we move from point and click and type, and I won't comment on live technical demos because that's been covered well enough, but point and click and type to touch and swipe to now talk, and besides talk, we're getting into more intuitive, the fact I have interfaces, we call it mixed reality, which is a combination of IoT and AR and VR, where it's just the subtle context, it's a gaze, it's a gesture, it's just something knowing what has to be done to interact with you because it knows who you are, what you're doing, what you've done before, what others in that situation have thought and needed before, and make that real. It wasn't Steve Jobs, it was Da Vinci who said the ultimate form of sophistication is simplicity. And I'll add a bit to it. So the ultimate form of simplicity is transparency. And so getting to the point where it's not just naturalistic and humanistic and conversational, but it actually becomes just a part, and we're delivering insight and intelligence as a part of people's jobs that they don't even know it's happening, is part of the goal. And then this broadest machine intelligence, for sure, we're beyond bullish on what it means. Cognitive and automation brings to life this idea of analytics historically has always been a passive, how do we look at what's happened, maybe how do we look at what's happening? And we've certainly shifted that to say, how do we be more actuating? How do we actually augment interaction and response? How do we take action based on what we know? And this move from predictive to prescriptive into actual automated response. But we're trying to move all of our clients very aggressively past that early rote repetitive scripting and workflow into true learning, into true intelligence, into cognitive automation. That's where the power truly is. So this wasn't collusion. The two presentations today have Reimagined as part of their kicker. I wish I could get Reimagineering from Disney because I think that's actually closer to the point, but I can't. So we use Reimagine. And really the anchor of how work has always been done and how we've always thought about our business and our customers and our products and services is the single biggest constraint that we find ourselves facing. And so how do we be bold in vision? How do we dream about tomorrow in a different way? But we can't forget about how do we get there from the realities of today. And I love that a lot of the stories you've heard have IT as a particularly beleaguered craft that I've called my own for 20 years, leading the charge in how do we apply these technologies within the IT operations side. Because there's one thing that's near and dear to my heart. Every company is a technology company now. You can't separate business strategy from technology strategy. And so the technology delivery capability of organizations needs to evolve dramatically in how we think about delivering value, how do we operate, how do we organize the skills that we need, how do we work. And so as a place to apply this technology to actually show immediate results, prove that it's credible and reliable, and then use it as a way to shepherd out broader ambitions to the business is a massive 1-2 punch. And you might be surprised, but one of the biggest offerings that we've launched in the last few years is helping educate the business at large about all the technology changes that are happening. Call it a digital academy, call it a tech fluency initiative, call it a tech college, but basically up the tech IQ of the business to understand that they can dream a little bigger, but then also educate them on their responsibility and role and how the way we deliver and think about budgeting and solution shaping and delivering IT needs to change along the way. Those two go together powerfully. The lineage and heritage of IPsoft actually is fantastic because it brings that to light and makes it easier to do. And if we combine those two, technology can be a capital T in the value it's creating, and nothing will hold us back on what we can do with all the pieces in front of us.